Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Steffan and I'm the owner of FishTravel.co.uk. Today's video is going to be covering the tackle that you need to be taking if you're heading sea trout fishing in Argentina. I've been heading there for 25 seasons or so I know the rivers really well, the time of year you want to be going there, and also obviously the tackle you need to be taking with you. If you're considering a trip, please do make contact. I'll be delighted to assist with that to make sure you're on the right river at the right time of year. And also, the lodges vary a lot, so just make sure that the lodge actually suits you and your requirements as well. So please do make contact on that front. The tackle I will be covering today will primarily be for the Rio Grande and the Rio Gallegos, which are the two bigger rivers you're going to be fishing if you do head down to South America for the sea trout. I also know the likes of the Irigoyen intimately, so I can also advise on that front, but this video is primarily going to be targeted for the Rio Gallegos and the Rio Grande. There's always three rods, and I've got them laid out in front of me here. There's always three rods that I will take with me if I'm heading to either of those rivers. First and foremost, there's a single-hander. I would never travel there without a single-hander. The single-hander is primarily for if you're doing some nymph fishing, if the river is very low, very clear, if you need to just be a bit more delicate in your presentation. But also some of the lodges, especially on the Rio Grande, will have access to the Rio Menendez. And again, on the likes of the Rio Menendez, you do not want to be fishing a big rod. So again, the single-hander has a lot of applications, so I wouldn't travel without a single-hander. Something around a 10-foot for a number 7 or a number 8 would be absolutely perfect. So a lot of you will have that for your sea trout fishing and salmon fishing at home, or even your lake fishing for that matter. So 10 foot for a 7, 10 foot for an 8. So got this here, literally the 10 foot for a 7 weight. This is the Sage R8. Really nice rod in terms of targeting sea trout in particular, just because of the action. It's a medium fast action, so it's not too fast, loads really well, but it's just a great fishing rod as opposed to a lot of the rods nowadays are casting rods. This is a very nice fishing rod. On your single-hander, you only need a floating line, so that makes life a lot easier in terms of packing, traveling, everything. So you only need a floating line. I would recommend a fairly fast loading floating line, so short belly, short head, whichever way you want to call it. That is in terms of if the wind does kick up, then you want that extra weight in your taper to essentially turn everything over. So you only need a floating line, but make sure that it's a fairly fast loading floating line. I would just carry the floating line, because then on the floating line I would carry a selection of poly leaders. So I tend to use the airflow poly leaders. Make sure, this is really important, make sure they're in salmon strength, salmon steelhead strength essentially. So they will have a core of around 24 pounds at the very minimum. You will need that, so make sure you don't bring trout poly leaders. 8 or 10 foot, something similar, but the poly leaders are then great just to slot onto your floating line on your single hander, and that just allows you to pack just a handful, one reel, one line, and then this, and you can cover most circumstances or most situations with that setup. So I would carry them, everything from the poly leaders, everything from floating, hover, intermediate, all the way through to extra super fast sinking. So they cost around £7 or £8 each, so it's worth getting a full selection of them to take with you. So that really covers the single-hander and why I would take that. The next one I would take then is a switch rod. So the switch rod is probably what you're going to be using 80–90% of the time. This one is actually, I think 11.5 foot 7 weight. This is the Sage Sonic. Really nice rod. So 11.5 foot 7 weight. This is again something you'd be using the majority of the time, especially if it's not too windy, if the river is not too high, if you're not throwing really heavy tips, and if you're not throwing really heavy flies. This is probably the rod that you're using the majority of the time. Very light. If you're using a rod all day long, this is just a perfect tool to be using, because you're not going to kill yourself if you're using it for hours on end. So I would never leave home without a switch rod. Again, something around 11 and a half foot, something similar, 7, 8 weights, around that ballpark. So on the line front, I tend to then on this front and also the next rod I'm going to be discussing, which is the longer rod, I tend to use a lot more tips on this front and the head system on this front, and that's simply because it enables me again to travel light but to cover a lot of different situations just by carrying one reel. So you have the reel, the running line, and then I can chop and change, which I'll go through, chop and change the heads according to the prevailing conditions. Anything from a long Scandi through to Skagits. So everything can be covered on this essentially, just by carrying the running line and then a selection of heads. So I'll go through the heads in a second, along with the tips and stuff for that. But just moving on quickly, the other one then is the longer and heavier rod, which is the 13 foot. So the 13 foot, around there, 12 and a half, 13 and a half, something similar, but in that range. And again, anything from a 7 through to a 9. This is the 13 for an 8. And this again, I'm just carrying, it's got the running line on, it's actually got the head system on here already. But again, even on this one now, it's basically the running line, so I can chop and change accordingly. What you'll also notice about everything I have here is the overall length. They're all travel rods essentially. Well, yeah, the single hander is a 4 weight, which is pretty commonplace nowadays. But my 13 footer, for example, is a 6 piece. The switch is a 4 piece. That's as long as I can get into my case, in fairness. Like 11 and a half foot in a 4 piece is as long as my case will take. I prefer to have everything in one case rather than looking around for that travel rod case to come through the luggage on the carrier essentially, or the second item, the second reason for having everything shorter and fitting into the main bag, you don't then have a second luggage charge on the second item. So I prefer everything to be in one case, hence why I'm looking for travel options. So again, both of these are the switch and the double hander, running line setup with heads. And then on the head front, again, I usually bring this then, which covers absolutely everything. So again, through for my Scandi systems, I always carry a spare running line just in case anything happens in that front. I always bring a spare running line. But then this is all the way through from Scandis through to heavy Skagits. And this wallet essentially then covers everything that I'm going to need for both of these outfits. On the tip front, on this front, so I don't tend to, you can, in fairness, if you're using a Scandi short on the switch, you can get away with using the poly leaders, no problem whatsoever. However, if you're going through to more of the Scandi shorts or more onto the Skagit system, then I tend to use, and the same setups will almost apply for the switch and the 13 footers. With that, I'm carrying this wallet which has virtually everything. You know, it's everything from a full floating through to, I think the heaviest in this wallet is actually a Type 5-7. They're in 10 foot and 15 foot. So I really think that it's imperative to carry a lot of different tips. So if you're only carrying one reel for each outfit, a few different heads, carry a lot of different tips essentially, and the tips can make a big difference. And even on this, if I'm carrying a few different Skagits, for example, some Skagits will be full float, some will be float over intermediate, and even from there down as well. And that will just help you cover all of the layers and cover all situations that you're likely to face. With both these systems, I can get away with it on the switch to a certain extent as well. I will carry a good selection of essentially your tungsten tips, so your T systems. So your airflow flow tips or your Rio Mo tips. So essentially they're more designed for your Skagit systems, but if you get a really windy day, if the water's very cold, if the water's higher, quite often you will call on some of these T tips, and I will carry them from everything from a T8 through to a T17 and even T20. That's just a small selection. In fairness, I have another wallet, the airflow flow tips as well. I quite like having, again, just the different densities just to cover every situation you're likely to face. if you're traveling all this way, spending all the money to visit these lodges, it's better to be really prepared for the trip. So if it's just a case of buying a few packs of different tips, and if that makes the difference between a fish or not catching a fish, I think it's money well spent. So make sure you have a few different heads to cover different situations. Again, you might call for a Scandi system on a really flat, calm day. You might even go on the single-hander if that's the conditions. But again, you need some of the Skagits or the short head systems as well if the weather does call for that, essentially. The final thing I'm going to cover here before moving on to clothing, flies, etc. is your leader systems. You don't want to be fishing below at least 12 pounds, so 12 pounds and above, but ideally 15 and above. Rarely will these fish be leader shy. They'll be shy about clumsy wading, they'll be shy about clumsy casting, they'll be shy about perhaps the wrong size fly, for example, a big fly or whatever, but rarely will they be as leader shy as you think they will be. So the minimum I tend to fish with, unless I'm fishing the single-hander nymphing, for example, where I might drop down to like 12 pounds, most of the time I'm fishing so 15.5. That's the kind of your daytime go-to. That or 12 or 15 pound in Maxima Ultra Green, which is just an industry standard. I would definitely take a couple of spools on that as well. When fishing then into the evening, where the fish are totally not leader shy at all, so you're fishing the magic hour, let's just call it that. But if you are fishing into that time of the evening, then just go on something heavy and really robust. At that point, I go to 25. It may seem like an overkill, but it really helps you turn the flies over. The fish don't care, so you shouldn't care either. 25 pound is 0.43. It's thick. Again, the fish don't care, and it helps you turn over those big flies. But again, also bring some Maxima Ultra Green. I don't have it in front of me here. So you need fluorocarbon and Maxima Ultra Green. If you just bring those 4 or 5 spools, it'll cover virtually everything that you're going to be faced with. So when you're out and about on the river, rarely will you have to walk far from the vehicle. The guides tend to park pretty much alongside most of the pools that you're fishing. So it's really recommended that you take a good backpack with you, like a good waterproof backpack. Just make sure that essentially it is waterproof. If you're leaving, especially on the riverbank, or if you're going to be doing some wading with it or whatever, I do recommend a good waterproof backpack. This also doubles as your hand luggage, so I tend to use this as my hand luggage, which then transforms into my fishing bag for the week. So yeah, a backpack is really essential, so do bring a good backpack with you. But then when you're just walking around, you don't want to be carrying that all the time when you're fishing, obviously. I tend to take like a waist pack. Just make sure, again, that is waterproof. You don't want water going in there and clogging all of your, waterlogging all of your flies essentially, but always take a waist pack with me. You can take a chest pack if you want to, but to be honest, for this type of fishing, I think a waist pack is just more relevant for this type of fishing. But again, make sure that it is waterproof. That just carries everything that I need for a given session. So what tends to happen, you tend to fish a morning session, return to the lodge for lunch and a siesta before going out into the afternoon evening session. So for example, I've got a torch here. I obviously wouldn't be taking a torch for the morning session. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but you can essentially decanter whatever you want from one to the other for the morning session and the evening session, just to keep it pertinent for that session. But in here, I'll obviously have the tips I'm likely to use, the flies I'm likely to use, the leader material I'm likely to use. I don't like clogging this up too much because, again, the car is going to be within easy reach. So everything that I don't need, not too much bulk in here, I just leave in the main bag. But beyond that, I will always have, again, flies, some leader material, simple things like I always take a water thermometer with me, have great confidence in just monitoring what's happening on the water temperature perspective, so I'll always take that with me. A little hook hone, so if you do blunt the hook on a rock or whatever, you can just sharpen that up. A lot of people don't do that. It's such a simple thing that can mean the difference between landing a fish and not, so do carry a little simple hook hone. There is a hole over the ozone layer down here, so be incredibly careful. You can probably see my cheeks now, actually. You have to be really careful with the sun down here. Even though you may not feel that warm, especially if it's windy, the sun can be really dangerous. So make sure you carry some high SPF factor sunscreen with you at all times. So make sure you cover up on that front. Then simple things like your tippet rings or leader rings, I have great confidence in them. I put them at the end of my, specifically at the end of the poly leaders, so I always carry some of them. I don't care about the weight of the fish essentially, so a lot of the time just a simple measuring tape. You can keep the fish in the water at all times, obviously. You just get a simple measure on the fish. If you've got a copy of my book, the Sea Trout book, you'll see actually 2 or 3 good tables in there to convert length and girth of sea trout into weight. So if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. There's actually a really good table in there just simply for length as well. So I tend to carry that, just a simple ruler on that front, a measuring tape on that front. Sunglasses, obviously really essential, always carrying them with me. Protecting your eyes at all times, and again the sun can be quite strong, so always a good idea to have them alongside you. Around my neck then I always have a lanyard, and that will have easy access to my snips and my forceps, but also again I will also have a little torch on there as well. So that just, it's around my neck at all times, and I have easy access to that. So between that and then everything I've got in my pack, I'm well and truly covered. So I was talking about the torch. I do take a torch. You're not essentially allowed to fish after the magic hour or sundown on the Rio Grande, but still you will be walking around or changing your flies when it is into dusk essentially. So a torch can be a really useful tool to have with you. But that's essentially what I'm carrying close to hand at all times. So now I'm going to cover flies, probably what a lot of you have been waiting for. So some of the flies you use at home will be absolutely relevant for the fishing down at the Rio Grande, the Rio Gallegos. Do take them with you, but only take them with you if they're on strong hooks. You're allowed to use barbed, so that's not an issue. You don't have to debarb or use barbless hooks, but strictly no trebles. So barbed is fine, singles and doubles only. Some of your sea trout patterns, some of your small salmon patterns, absolutely take them with you. Your silver stoats, a lot of the traditional flies you would use at home, they're the same fish. They're the same, it's still a sea trout. They act very much the same as the sea trout at home. They're just a lot bigger. So do take some of those patterns with you. Sunray shadows, monkeys, all of those patterns are absolutely relevant, so do take them with you. But again, just make sure they're on really strong hooks. If they're not on strong hooks, do not risk that fish of a lifetime. You can buy some flies for the for these rivers, or some of the flies that has been specifically designed for these rivers. I've got a few patterns with Fulling Mill, for example. I think I've got 6 patterns designed specifically for the fishing in South America, and they are again designed on the hooks that you want to be using down here, and they are relevant patterns for down here. So they're a good go-to if you want to take some flies with you to begin with. Beyond that, and I can advise you on this front depending on the lodge you are going to, virtually all the lodges will have a good fly selection at the lodge that you can buy as you go, and I would really recommend you doing that, because almost no matter what you turn up with, the guides will almost invariably go, oh no, that's not the one, it's the one in my box, or whatever. So you can usually buy as you go throughout the week as well, and you'll probably end up saving money by doing that rather than buying too much before you go. There are also a couple of amazing guys, especially coming from the UK, that I can put you in touch with to tie you a selection for these rivers before you leave as well. And even when you do get down, I'm actually at on Tierra del Fuego at the moment. There's even a couple of local guys that I know down here that can actually tie you a selection. So by the time you get to the lodge, there's a selection waiting for you as well. So that's always an option. And I'll probably go down that route, especially if you haven't been here before, a first timer. That's probably a safer route. rather than wasting your money and buying too much before you get down here. As you can see, I just carry way too much flight. I'd only use, you know, a very small portion of what I've got in front of me here. So what have I got? 8 boxes, 8 main boxes, and I'll explain what I've got in front of me here. I don't need all of those, but they are to cover a lot of different situations in terms of the river's really high, river is really low, if I'm doing nymph fishing, if I'm doing, you know, swinging, if I'm fishing into the evening. So this kind of covers virtually everything these rivers are going to throw at me. I feel like I'm covered. So this is amassed. I've been coming down here for 25 seasons, so I've amassed, and it's changed. You know, the style has changed definitely over the years as well. I won't go into that too much, but this kind of covers all of the bases. So, for example, I've got, first box is just a box of nymphs, from really heavy tungsten dumbbell through to just some EMB patterns, copper johns. It's more about the size of the fly and the weight of the fly most of the time than the fly itself. So I would concentrate more on carrying different weights and different sizes than a myriad of different patterns. Green machines up here, wouldn't travel without a green machine. I've got some, what you call down here, some chubbies. So if I'm doing some dry dropper, clink and dink, whatever you want to call it, New Zealand style, I tend to use the chubbies for supporting nymphs, for example, if I'm fishing that style down here. There's one box of nymphs, there's then a second box of nymphs. This is, you know, cased caddises, a lot of CDC. I tend to use a lot more CDC than rubber legs nowadays. It just has a lot more movement, in fairness, on incredibly strong hooks again. And again, if you are going to tie your own, I'm happy to advise on which hooks to use on that front. But this kind of covers everything that I need on the nymphing perspective. Through to, I carry some streamers. I don't tend to use streamers a hell of a lot down here. You know, through your humonguses, silver humonguses, gold humonguses, some damsel patterns. If you go to the likes of the Odegotian, for example, you're fishing for the robolo, you'll need some like damsel patterns. So that just covers essentially everything that I need on the streamer perspective. I then wouldn't be without my wets. This box is an absolute mess at the moment, so excuse that. But this is my box of wets, essentially the same wets that I'd be using at home. You know, the Pearly Peter Ross, Squirrel Blues and Silvers, and then through to, you know, just a bog standard silver stoat, hothead silver stoats. A lot of these patterns, again, just patterns that you would use at home. I would carry them probably in 14s through to 8s, and that would cover or everything I need on that front. But I'd probably catch, if the river is as it should be, you know, in terms of height, temperature, water temperature, air temperature, I'll probably catch over 50% of my fish down here nowadays on wet flies. So 100% carry them, just make sure they're on strong hooks. Majority again on doubles, and they can be barbs. Through to then a lot of the bigger stuff. So all of these boxes are just big stuff essentially. Well, not all big stuff, but you know, your sunrays, intruders, leeches, everything is in here essentially. So I carry the sunrays in everything from maybe 4 or 5 centimeters through to, you know, some absolute monsters in fairness, and they kind of all have their role to play. Majority of the time, if I'm honest, something like that, you know, kind of 4 or 5 inches, it's probably a go-to on the sunray front. But again, then through to leeches, load of leeches and stuff in here, intruder patterns, a lot of movement and stuff in them. This tends to be, you know, if the water is higher coloured, or again, if you're fishing more into the evening, your sundown, your magic hour. Chartreuse leeches, again, especially if the water is cold, if there's some colour in the water, that's more of a kind of daytime pattern down here. But again, this kind of covers everything. And again, I do fish some of the leeches, huge, you know, they're 6 inches or more. The secret is just to carry, it doesn't have to be loads of different patterns, but make sure you're carrying them in different lengths essentially, and different weights, because some of the leech patterns will have dumbbell eyes on, some won't. And again, you can then just vary the weight of the tips rather than varying the weight of the flies too much. So obviously I'm not going to carry all of this stuff in my waist pack. It is always in my backpack. So if I need to go and get something specific, I can do so. But what I tend to do is decant from there into 2 smaller boxes. So I'll have this one box, which is literally, I got some squirmies in there as well. So I would just say, you should be carrying them. You really should. You know, certain days they may avoid a blank, and you haven't traveled all this way to, you can be a total appearist if you want, but yeah, I'd rather put a fish in the net than be a total appearist. So I do carry some squirmies, but this box carries my, everything from my green machines to my doubles to my nymphs. That box is just covering that aspect. So I just decant from there into here and replace accordingly, according to the conditions. And then I carry another small box, and this box is a mess, but I've been fishing for a few days already. Doesn't take long for me to make a mess. But yeah, this one carries then my leech patterns, my intruder patterns, everything through to my sun rays. So everything big essentially just gets dropped into there. So essentially then I just have these 2 boxes in my waist pack with my tips, my leader materials, and then I'm pretty good to go. So I'm mobile, but I still have easy access to everything that I need. And that pretty much covers what you would expect to be fishing from the fly perspective, and what you essentially need to be taking with you. But again, especially if it's your first time, don't worry too much. I can help on that front, but also the lodges should be able to help as well. The next thing to cover is your clothing. And this is probably one of the most important items to cover, because you are really far south here. If you bring the wrong equipment, it's going to be misery for you. It's as simple as that. Just really prepare well for every eventuality. You are so far south, you can have, even the week I've been here now, we've had -5 one evening, through to, it was 19 degrees and stuff in the daytime yesterday. So it can fluctuate a lot. Even during the day, it can fluctuate a lot. So just really be prepared. Again, the guide's vehicle is going to be close to hand. Leave everything that you need or don't need essentially in your backpack, but you can grab things as needed essentially. But pack well. Bring, I'm going to be throwing waders and all that kind of stuff, but it's really important to have lots of layers. So I tend to do a lot of stuff with Showful. I find their clothing stuff to be amazing. So Showful base layers, I tend to use the bottoms and the tops. But if you were to use this, then a pair of trousers, and again, just lots of layers, that's going to keep you perfectly warm, no matter what it's going to throw at you or what the weather's going to throw at you. It's very easy to take a layer off, but if you haven't got it with you, trust me, it can be misery. So make sure you bring plenty of layers with you. Again, just base layers. Good socks. Again, I love these Showful socks. Much longer than the normal ones. Kind of the fleece lining and stuff. But a really good pair of warm socks, warm wading socks are essential. Again, these are the Showful ones, by far the best I've used. Highly recommend them. Buff is essential again for just cutting the wind off your neck, saving your face as well because of the hole over the ozone layer. So a buff is really essential. Bring some gloves, especially ones you can flip over, so access to tying knots or whatever. Good pair of gloves, really need to bring them. A couple of different hats, even if you're wearing a baseball hat, you can just basically in the evening, or if it's colder, just shove that over, so you've got the double layer on that front. Do bring a good hat. A good down jacket is essential. This is again something you could be wearing as you're traveling down here, so it doesn't add too much bulk to everything you're bringing down anyway, but you really need a good down jacket or good insulated jacket. This is absolutely essential in above your base layers essentially. And then a really good wading jacket, something pretty thick that's going to cut through. It's going to keep you dry because you could be faced with driving wind, for example, driving rain or heavy wind. So you want something that's going to cut through and just keep you dry, warm and comfortable. So a good wading jacket is worth every penny. This is the Salar 2 with Schofel, again, is what I use. Highly recommend it. Great bit of kit. So that one. Through to your waders. The Rio Grande is really easy to wade. So you don't, as a rule, need a wading staff. If you have mobility issues, obviously bring them. But the river is very easy to wade and a very safe river to wade, so you don't, as a rule, need a wading staff. Even on the wading itself is purely gravel, well, the majority of the time it's just gravel, so the wading is really easy. There is, however, Didimo in the river, so just be really careful on that front that you don't transmit that back home. I wish more of the lodges down here in fairness did do like a dipping system. They don't. So it is down to you to make sure that you're not transferring Didimo back into your home systems. And on that front, always bring rubber soled boots, because if you bring felt, essentially Didimo can soak into the felt and is just there for a very long time, as opposed to rubber, which is a lot easier to wash down after your fishing trip. Just make sure the advice is check, clean, dry. Just make sure that you're not transferring things back. So just be aware there is Didimo, rubber soles if you can, and again, that's perfect for the river down here anyway, because it's very easy to wade. And then you need your chest waders. I've got this new pair actually of the Squala, very, very nice, really comfortable, but chest waders are essential down here. And again, just breathable, obviously, because you can have very warm weather as well. So do bring waders that, you know, will cope with everything. Base layers under this, even if it's cold, you're going to be perfectly fine. So chest waders are essential, but beyond that, just make sure you're bringing lots of layers with you. Anything you're not using, leave it in your backpack, leave it in the car, but make sure you have easy access to it at all times. The final little tip, I actually started for a couple of seasons now bringing these down. There's two in here actually. They last for around 10 hours, I think, or 12 hours actually. They're little heat packs. They react with the air, so as soon as you take them out, you shake them around a little bit and they will last for around 10-12 hours. So if it is an incredibly cold day, cold evening, bringing a few packs of these down are actually really handy. Started doing it for a couple of seasons now, and I actually wouldn't come down here without them. Really handy and really cheap actually, so worth bringing a couple of those with you alongside, again,